My name is Vincent Holloway. I'm 69 years old at my son's wedding. His bride laughed to her bridesmaids and said I did not belong there. That I was not his real father, she thought. I did not hear her, I did. I was standing 6 feet away holding a small gift bag of cufflinks in one hand, and a set of silver keys to the lake house in the other. The same lake house she had already told have the guests she and my son would move into after the honeymoon. What she did not know is that the deed still carried only my name, and a lawyer with a leather folder was already walking through the door behind me. Before I tell you what happened next, please hit like and subscribe, drop your city and local time below. I love knowing where you're listening from. Now let me take you back 30 years. To a boy who called me Dad in his sleep long before he ever said it out loud. I married Caleb's mother when he was 5 years old. A thin boy with dark hair falling into his eyes, standing behind his mother's leg at our first dinner. One small fist wrapped around a plastic dinosaur. His birth father had been gone almost a year by then. Gone. Not dead, that distinction matters to adults, but not to children. To Caleb, gone was gone. He did not call me Dad right away. I never asked him to. Children know when adults are hungry for titles, and I never wanted him to feel eaten by my hope. So I learned him quietly instead, that he hated peas but liked green beans, that he kicked blankets off in his sleep, that he needed the whole light on until he was almost 9. By the time he was 7, he stopped correcting people who called me his father. When he was 6, he got pneumonia and spent 4 nights in the hospital. I stayed in the plastic chair beside his bed while his mother worked the overnight shift to keep our insurance at 3 in the morning. Feverish and half asleep, he reached for me and whispered, "Don't go." I did not when he was 15 and shouted that I was not his real father because I would not let him ride with a drunk friend. I cried alone in the laundry room where he could not see me. The next morning he left a note on the counter, sorry, that I kept it for 20 years. Brianna entered Caleb's life with a soft voice and sharp ideas about what counted as real. She never called me Dad. Not once. Always carefully Vincent. Like she was placing distance on a table. At first I did not mind. Names take time, but Brianna did not need time. She needed a category from me. Stepfather at family photos. Her husband's widowed father when inheritance came up, and such a blessing whenever she wanted something opened, paid for, or signed. The lake house was mine, left to me by Caleb's late mother. The same house where I taught him to swim. The same house where I held him the night after her funeral while he said, "I don't know who I am without her," and I told him, "You are still." My son Brianna loved that house enough to take engagement photos there, captioning them beginning our forever at the Holloway family lake house, never mentioning that I had unlocked the door myself and left fresh flowers in the kitchen. Months before the wedding, Caleb and Brianna came to my kitchen asking if they could stay at the lake house the first 2 years to save money. I agreed to consider an occupancy agreement. Nothing permanent. Nothing careless. Brianna had smiled so brightly you would have thought I'd handed her the deed outright at the vineyard on the wedding day. Standing near the archway, I heard her laugh to her bridesmaids. "Is that Caleb's dad?" "No," she said. "He doesn't belong here. He's not his real father." The room did not stop, but inside my chest, everything went silent. I looked at Caleb, 10 feet away in his black suit. He had heard her. I knew he had. His eyes found mine for half a second, then slid away. That was the moment I understood the invitation had been paper. Permission had never actually arrived. When Brianna finally noticed me, her smile stiffened. Only for a heartbeat before she asked where I would like to wait for photos, gesturing toward a shaded area near the side patio, away from the front row, away from the family she wanted clean. Before I could answer, the venue doors opened. A man in a charcoal suit stepped inside carrying a leather folder, silver hair, serious eyes, Alden Pierce, our estate lawyer, he called clearly across the room. Mr. Vincent Holloway. Brianna's smile disappeared instantly for the first time that day. Everyone looked at the man who supposedly did not belong. Mr. Pierce explained plainly, in front of the gathering guests, that the lake house remained solely under my ownership, and that the occupancy agreement under discussion would have allowed Caleb and Brianna temporary residence. With no transfer of title and no ownership rights whatsoever, the word owned moved through the room like a dropped glass, and I watched panic arrive behind Brianna's eyes, rearranging every plan she had already built around a house that was never legally hers to inherit. Caleb stepped toward me. "Please, we can talk about this after the ceremony," I asked him plainly. "Could we have talked before you let your bride say I did not belong?" He admitted, quietly. He had known I was not listed in the program, had known I was not planned for the front row, had known the photos were being arranged without me entirely. "I wish this had gone differently. I wish my son had defended 30 years of fatherhood," the moment he heard those words leave her mouth. Instead of standing frozen while she edited me out of his wedding, one polite phrase at a time, but wishes do not undo months of carefully erasure disguised as simple wedding planning. The truth does not. When Brianna's mother tried to soften the moment, saying emotions run high at weddings, I told her plainly that her daughter's emotions had not stopped her from accepting my keys for engagement photos months earlier. Mr. Pierce asked, given the current circumstances, whether I still wished to proceed with the occupancy agreement. That day I looked at the silver keys resting in my palm, and felt, for the first time in months, completely and quietly in control of what happened next. That night, alone in my study long after the wedding guests had gone home, I sat with Mr. Pierce reviewing every document one final time. The original deed, the trust maintenance addendum, the draft occupancy agreement that would never now be signed. Every piece of paper confirmed the same simple truth Brianna had spent months trying to quietly write around. The lake house belonged to me alone, and nothing about that wedding day had changed it. Just before midnight, I signed a formal notice instead, confirming to my attorney that no occupancy agreement would be executed and that the property would remain solely under my name indefinitely. Out with no informal arrangement to be implied by anything discussed prior to that day, 12:03 in the morning. I am 69 years old. I am, for the first time in months, no longer the quiet, easily dismissed stepfather Brianna had spent an entire wedding season editing out of her story, somewhere in the city. Caleb and Brianna were almost certainly still processing what had happened at the vineyard. With no idea the formal legal notice already being drafted would remove any remaining ambiguity about who actually controlled the home they had built their entire future narrative around. In the days following the wedding, Brianna attempted to reach out several times, each message carrying a slightly different tone, apologetic, then confused, then eventually frustrated that the lake house conversation had not simply resolved itself the way she expected. I did not respond immediately, letting the silence do what my presence at that vineyard had already begun. Caleb called eventually, his voice quieter than I had heard in years, asking if there was any way to still discuss the lake house arrangement going forward. I told him plainly that any future conversation about that house would need to start with an honest conversation about what happened at his wedding, not simply a return to convenient silence once the immediate embarrassment had passed. He looked at me, even over the phone, the way he always had, expecting. The father who absorbed every slight quietly for the sake of peace. I was not that man anymore, and I had not been since the moment Mr. Pierce closed that leather folder in front of every guest at that vineyard. I raised a son believing that love does not need to beg to be titled. That quiet consistency eventually speaks louder than any name ever could. I always thought that lesson simply applied to fatherhood. I understand now it applies just as clearly to protecting what you have built, even from people who have learned to call your presence complicated. Caleb and Brianna's marriage began under considerably more strain than either of them expected. The lakehouse conversation still unresolved as of this recording is for me. I still hold those keys, and for the first time in years, I no longer feel any need to explain to anyone why I am holding them. I think about that boy with the plastic dinosaur every time I walk through that lakehouse door now, and I think, the people who try hardest to write you out of the story are usually the ones who understood, all along, exactly how much of the story actually belonged to you. If you have ever been quietly erased from a family you spent decades building, I want to hear your story. Tell me in the comments, and if this one moved you, subscribe to Dad's Revenge Tales. There is more where this came from.